On the podcast today, we are going to speak about the nature of enlightenment. Is it an event? What actually is enlightenment? What is this process of awakening that people get attracted to, particularly in the Eastern spiritual paths? And there are numerous books on this, and we've discussed about this a lot on the podcast before. And a lot of people get confused because people think that enlightenment itself is in alignment with some sort of siddhi, some sort of magical power, or some sort of event. And it's not really that at all, is it?
No, not at all. I think people, again, get confused the Eastern spirituality with the material science of the West, I think. Because material science of the West is discussing these, again, like Big Bang and like a physical, conceivable reality of these actions, right? And also, I find it a lot of developed world people get confused with the awakening experience with these fakirs of in India mainly, like people who really challenging themselves physically so that they can forget the pain of physical pain and the emotional process they're going through, having that pain and this and that to overcome in order to become awakened and enlightenment. But there is obviously different ways to realize ourselves, the undifferentiated consciousness. But actually, that's not it. That's actually what obstruct people to realize what actually enlightenment is, right?
That's right. We need to realize that enlightenment itself is not far, it's near. It's actually ever present.
Yes.
And we forget that because we forget many things about the nature of reality, but that one primarily. So fundamentally, you are the Atman, you are the undifferentiated consciousness, always and will ever be. So it's not as though that's something you can seek. It's not something that's far away. It's something that you realize when you begin to negate what you are not. And so that's part of the process of awakening. And people forget that because I think a lot, particularly in the developed world and in the West, the enlightenment has been associated incorrectly with the ego because they think that the self means persona. They think when I say you, they think I'm saying you as a person instead of addressing the self, the Atman. And so the process of awakening is about negating what you are not. Okay, so what aren't you? Well, I'm not Jason. Temporarily, that's there. That's a interface with other beings in reality that are also using another interface system.
Yes.
But we're all missing the essential nature that behind the interface. And so it's about negating that. This is what neti is in Sanskrit, right? It's not this, not this. It's about the ability to cultivate your awareness to the point where you can see into your own mind and you can see these temporary artificial conditioning and concepts and beliefs and that have been inculcated in your mind from birth. And the ability to see those and the ability to distance yourself from those, which then builds... It's interesting because when you begin to distance yourself from those, you begin to familiarize yourself with the Atman, with the undifferentiated consciousness.
Yes, again, the process of redefining vasanas and samskaras, right? Vasanas and samskaras get accumulated within ourselves is from keep associating with object, right? Subject-object relationship, right? We keep identifying ourselves with these names and forms, and I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, so that I should be this way, I should be that way, right? That's how we'd like to define ourselves. But we have to actually undo all that kind of mind activity, right? That is to unwind the vasanas and samskaras so that we can finally gain a good samskaras and vasanas, right? That's the part of the process of realizing ourselves. Again, the moksha, nirvana itself is to be released right? To be released from our own concept of ego or persona. Ego or persona actually don't exist. That's just a made up, again, word to be able to call what that is, right? But ego and persona actually don't exist at all. We made up our own, in our own mind, right?
Yeah.
That I'm from this country, I'm like this, and my culture is like this, so that I'm like this, and almost like you just want to rationalize your own behavioral habits, right?
Yep.
But again, we know that is not everlasting. It's always changing. You change when the environment changes. Whatever it changes is not permanent. That's impermanent, right?
Yep.
So that undoing all that process and realizing, like you said, what's not your true self is the realization.
Yes. You're peeling those layers back. And to clarify, vasanas means habitual ways and latent tendencies, and samskaras means mental impressions and subliminal imprints, for those who are unfamiliar with those terms. And as Ramana Maharishi always said, it's the accumulation of those vasanas that eclipses that our innate nature is moksha. It's just we are a living embodiment of moksha itself.
Yes.
We are truly an enlightened being, but we've gone through a conditioning process where we develop layers to cope with the world, to cope with ourselves as a ego, as a persona, and then it gets thicker and thicker as you get older. And unfortunately, if it's too late, sometimes those layers are so thick you've forgot the kernel of truth itself. And this is why in some ashrams, particularly in India, they don't allow people over 30 to join the ashram. Because according to some Vedantic sages, over time, they found that people over 30, particularly if they hadn't started the spiritual process before that they were very difficult to reach, or for whatever reason, this conceptual framework of spirituality and deepening yourself in the self, in the Atman, was very hard for people over 30 to reach. Now, they use 30 as kind of sort of a generic number. Then 30, 31, you don't want to get too technical, right? But they used it as an example. And you and I both know that there's still some ashrams, because we know some teachers that teach at these ashrams that won't accept any people to become part of the order there if they're over 30. Obviously, if you're over 30, you can go and visit the ashram, listen to satsangs, and meditate in the space. But to become part of that lineage, you won't be allowed to, because to go into some of the deeper tenets of Vedanta, they won't allow you in, because they of the belief that these vasanas are so strong that your samskaras, your basement, is completely full. It's loaded.
Yeah, I can understand, and somewhat I can make sense of it too, because by age 30 or more, our vasana samskaras get thickened and thickened, and just like muscle memory or just the muscles in general, our nervous system in the brain is just like muscle. It's muscle is working, firing, and usually just like muscle memory or muscles itself, that if you train in certain way, it more likely tend to move that way all the time, right? And the reaction as well, like when some kind of outside the impact on your certain body, they react certain way in accordance to the muscle memory, right? Just like that, our brain is the same, right? We've been reacting certain way for so long that it is very difficult to change, right? But to undo that is also part of spiritual practice, but it may take a lot longer after 30 than below 30.
Yes.
Probably. Let's say if you were to be very lucky enough to start when you were a child,
Well,
your muscles in your brain, the nervous system will be very flexible and very open, and it won't be reactive. It's going to be very calm, and before you make a decision or say, you will have a better understanding or perspective, right, before take any action.
yes. I forget who it was, but when I was younger, a person over 50, maybe part of my family or with friends, said that, you'll see, after 50, you just become more bitter, more jaded, more cynical. And I thought it was a sad perspective, because the people I know, particularly from teaching Eastern philosophy for a long time now, is that a lot of my audience are over 50, and a lot of these people have found it over 50 and kind of make what that gentleman said when I was younger completely untrue.
That's right.
Because there is hope. There's always hope. Even to speak to what we were saying about the over 30, okay, we can understand it from a lineage and an ashram perspective, particularly if someone's really super political, or you can get those sorts of people, right? There is this kind of militant spirituality that's kind of infected the world as well, which is very sad. But if you can sincerely do the work and turn your back on the cynicism, on the being jaded and bitter, because look, if you're not doing spiritual practice and the older you live, being bitter, jaded and cynical is just part and parcel of life. Because you've seen enough, and sometimes people are hypocritical, people you can't trust, because they too aren't on the spiritual path. And so that can be part and parcel of living life. But if you're really sincere, and even if you're over 50 and you're listening to this, and you're only just beginning on the path, there's not like that it's the end. There's hope. It's fortunate that you've found it, and you can just turn your attention away. It's like one of the great yogis said, like when they said, how do I get out of all of these vasanas and samskaras, and how can I get out of this constant cycle of samsara? And the yogi said, just turn away. Just turn your attention away. Where your attention always is usually where energy is. So if you're constantly bringing your mind back to the Atman, back to the self, that's what will become your life. And you'll deepen your consciousness, you'll become a much better person as a consequence. And you'll be able to see reality more purely as it truly is, not how you think it should be as a jiva, a person.
Well, that's something, the most beautiful decision you've ever made. I think if you did make that decision, right? Just to turn away, no matter how old you are, really,
Course, yeah.
Again, where there is energy, where there is attention, there is energy. So, like, if you turn around and look the other way, the door will open up.
100%. And so, to our original point, the accumulation of those vasanas and samskaras, according to how we conduct ourselves in the world, our karma, our actions and unconscious actions, can all be burnt away, as Ramana Maharshi said. They can all be burnt away. Your vasanas can be all burnt away, but it's about the realization and the abidance in our true enlightened nature. Because a lot of people would ask Ramana, for example, and say, well, okay, if we are enlightened, we are the self already, how do I get rid of all of these binding vasanas that I have? How do I get rid of these samskaras? And Ramana didn't really have a whiz-bang technique apart from self-inquiry, atma-vicharya, but he said that if you're constantly abiding in the self, then the vasanas naturally burn away. And what does that do when your vasanas burn away? Your samskaras, the luggage is beginning to be thrown out. Because you're not operating from the jiva anymore. You're operating from your actual true nature.
Yeah, that abiding in your true nature, the pure consciousness, is the process of cutting the chain off between the subject-object association.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
Because, again, Sat Chit Ananda is the state when you are residing in that pure consciousness, that sat, that you exist. When you are in a deep meditation, that you get to realize, or you get to come to a little bit of the feeling of the presence that, oh, I'm here, I exist. As simple as that, I am here.
Without concepts, without
nothing.
Name.
Is completely, you're completely present. I'm here. And that's the pure consciousness, the consciousness. And that brings a immense bliss, that Ananda. And that simply it is. That if you want to call it enlightenment, yes. that is the... It's not anything like a thunderstorm and lightning happening.
No.
It's not anything like a big eventful thing. No. Simply that. And when you reside in that state longer and longer and more often than not, that's how we can thin out our vasanas, the latent tendencies, and to clean out what's been stored in our subconscious mind from the past memories and traumatic experience. And again, the reason why we think that psychologically we are suffering is because of keep associating that past self to the present self.
Yep.
That is the main cause of I'm going through a lot of emotional pain. I need emotional healing, and people often say that. But that is all the result of us keep associating with the past self to present self.
Yep.
But again, Sri Ramana Maharishi is teaching is to keep cutting that chain off. You are not that. No. It's pretty simple to understand, actually. You are here in this present moment years and years later at a completely different place, with a completely different people and surrounding. And how can you think that you are the same person as in the past, in the memory, in the painful memory? But you are a completely different person.
Yep.
What keeps you bind with that self in the past is just the ego, the mind is what's trying to keep,
trying to hold on to itself.
Hold on to itself, yes. So you just gotta let go of that grip.
Yep. Yep.
And to be able to do it, you need to sit and fully be present with your own pure self.
Yep. That's a tough reality for a lot of people who have had traumatic experiences, right? Where we've seen people in satsang, for example, before, and Ramana actually encountered these people as well. And, with great compassion, he spoke to them. But in the end of the day, the information is the same. You have to realize that the ego, though he's not saying that it's not that it didn't happen to you.
Yes.
Right? Of course it happened to you. But the ego's association with it to hold you into a certain state is a prison in and of itself. And so you're held into this past experience which you can't let go of. And the ultimate way to let go of that is to see it, but abide in your true nature. And you said a beautiful thing recently where you said, forget all your psychiatry and your psychology, come and spend a month or two at the foot of Arunachala here and just abide in the self, and all things disappear.
Yes.
And this is what Ramana always said, this is what all the great sages always say, that instead of engaging always with that trauma, disengage. It's not that it didn't happen, but disengage with that trauma and abide in your true nature, because that's who you truly are anyway. The ego is a temporary phenomenon. It's a wave in an ocean. You are the ocean.
Yeah, it's actually, life becomes much more simple when you are in a good environment like this, to do your work, inner work. And sometimes you have to put yourself in a situation where things come a bit easier, because that's the only way you can come to the real realization, right? 100%. As you mentioned, I did mention that you don't need a psychiatry session that costs hundreds of dollars and the time of your day and all these things. once you get to come to a country like India and sit beside just random local people and share a tea, and that itself can be done.
Yeah.
You don't need a lot of effort to resolve this problem that you think that you have. But reality is simple as that. That's what we've been missing out, really.
Yeah.
Because of that, we've been suffering, because we've missed out this simple, beautiful moment in your life. But some people never get to experience it while they keep suffering from the mental illness and anxiety issues, right? But yeah, if you get to put yourself in a situation where you can be in a place where you really belong, and you see the humility and honesty and just the pure hearts of these people around you, then you become that. And that's it's important for everyone. We all need to experience it, I think.
Yeah, 100%. Psychology and psychiatry and that are always dealing in the field of society and culture. So they'll try and tend to your problems to be able to cope in that society and culture.
Yes.
And sometimes for people who have had extreme traumatic experiences, you need to escape the society and culture that gave birth to the trauma you experienced. You need to divorce from that, go and see a different place, abide. For example, we're in Tiruvannamalai, abide in a place like this, go to the ashram every day, walk up the mountain, connect with the mountain, connect with nature, and just be. And what you'll see is you'll come back more into harmony with yourself, and you'll be able to distance yourself from that traumatic experience. Not in a non-empathetic way, but in a way that's very compassionate. You can see your former self, but you've realized who you truly are now. And that's the process for all of us, not even for those who have had a traumatic experience, but anyone in general, because everyone has suffered to some degree, in differing degree, right?
Yes.
And to alleviate that, as you mentioned before with Satchidananda, when you can just be and you know that in reality you just exist, everything else is just icing on the cake, that's when Ananda comes, true bliss. And that bliss will destroy any vasanas, will destroy any past experiences, because if you can abide in that, what's better than that? It's unassociated bliss. You don't need association for that bliss.
Yes. Unconditional.
And those who have experienced it, who are listening and watching now, will know what I'm talking about. And those who haven't will probably think I'm talking gobbledygook, but it's a fact of the matter.
Yes.
When you can just abide in the nature of the Atman, then that bliss arises. And there are certain places in the world, like where we are now, that can facilitate that so that you can take that out further into any other place that you go. And enlightenment and the awakening process itself is a deepening of that.
Yes.
It's a deepening of that. So as you were talking about describing enlightenment before, enlightenment itself is really a recognition of what you truly are, and as opposed to what you are not. Now, all that happens after that is a awakening process, is a deepening of that. So we could then say, technically, okay, so the more deeper and deeper that you go, the more permanent your abidance in the Atman is, and that is enlightenment. Okay, we can say that as well, technically, right? But usually what happens when you've understood what you are and what you are not, then the process, that deepening process begins, and that becomes kind of your operating system.
Yes.
Everything else is temporary. The job you have, the interactions you have, the places you are, they become a temporary thing in your life where it's the deepening of that process that is the main focus of your life going forward. Yeah, sure, you can do fun things, right? You can play violin, we can do this podcast and share this with other people. It's all fun.
Yes.
It's taken in good jest, right?
Yes.
In good humor. But the process is that deepening process going forward.
Yeah, and people often question that, how can I remain that enlightened state of mind. That's I think most people would be curious about, right? Like, okay, so I have tasted it, the feel of it, intuitive feeling from the deep meditation. How do I abide in that permanently, really? But again, like the process is not any different. You just keep staying in this state of mind, and instead of asking to experience to the peaceful, the abiding in the true self experience, instead of chasing that, just keep looking at what's not me. Again, the neti practice of neti.
Yeah.
Like when we realize what's not our true self, we naturally uncover. We will discover that what's true self, right? So yes, keep brushing out that what's not us neti.
And one of the important things to remember, to elaborate on what you were saying, and the bind that we get us in, even what I was saying before, what you were saying, like talking about enlightenment as a finality, it's not a time-bound thing. And so with our linear mindset, we think that enlightenment is a time-bound thing. We think there's a process. We think there's all of these things that we need to do to be enlightened. How do I abide in enlightenment permanently? So we have all of these time-bound concepts of what it is. And enlightenment is non-linear, as I mentioned in my book, Enlightenment Now. But so then we have to change our relationship with how we see it and how we actually experience it. And that's one of the big problems when Eastern philosophy went west. It was turning enlightenment into a final goal, or turning it into an event in time, when enlightenment in itself is the firm abidance in the eternal reality, where there's no time exists.
Yes.
And so that eternal aspect of ourselves is always here, always ever present, but we go further and further away from that due to the complexity of the world and the complexity of our own mind that's been conditioned by the world. And so, as we've been discussing, peeling those layers away, peeling those vasanas and those samskaras away, which purifies your karma and allows you then to have a firm abidance in that. And not that you've attained this state, you abide in it. It's again, the wave and the ocean analogy. The wave is doing its thing, but the wave subsides always. And that's kind of how our nature of our mind is. But can we turn the ocean into a still lake and just abide as that still water, transparent water?
Yes, we often misunderstand the awakening is like step by step process. Like, okay, that's the first step. I graduated that. Jump to next step. I graduated that, and next step,
University of Enlightenment.
So like a very linear and that's conventional conditioned mind, isn't it? Like when we want to achieve something, that's how we achieve it in the developed world, right? So we think the same way with the spiritual practice. We graduate that step, we move to the next step. But it's not really like that. It's on in the question and answer with when Ramana Maharishi was alive, is that people ask that, like, how does the world appear for an enlightened man or something like that? Like, it's kind of cute and innocent question, you could say. But it doesn't, because you're an awakened, enlightened person, doesn't have this experience of reality already. It's not like that.
No.
The activity of mind, it's still there. These random thoughts will still arise, right? And there might be some subtle habits might still be there. All these things are just like it's pretty ordinary actually. It's the same as everyone else. But big difference is that person reside in the true self for a long time, so that these things that comes to your mind or thoughts, activity, and things like that is just like a phenomena. It's not real. So that person can just sit back and watch, as you mentioned with the wave in the ocean. They're just watching. Wave goes crazy and then subside.
Yep.
Go again and then subside. While you yourself, your pure consciousness, remain as ocean, the ocean of pure consciousness, right?
Yeah.
So that's defining difference
Yes.
between the person who realized and not.
Exactly. The awareness of an enlightened sage, like Ramana, for example, because of the abidance in the Atman, sees the phenomena of the mind, because he still has mind, as clouds, but doesn't want to fly into the cloud, doesn't want to grab the cloud and hold on to it. His mind essentially doesn't wander. That's the difference. So the difference between him and us mere mortals is that a thought will be there, and then we start moving, we start gravitating with it, and we start going down that rabbit hole,
Yes,
and then
yes.
we're gone. That's the difference between an enlightened sage and us mere mortals, is that's how our mind is. Sometimes we go with it, and then next minute, 10 minutes is gone, you're like, wow, I was just
thinking
about basically nothing.
Thinking about your thoughts and
Thinking about
one
your own
after the
thoughts.
other. And
Like Alan Watts once said, you've got nothing to do but think of your own thoughts. So, and that's often what most people do. They're just thinking about their own thoughts, which is, when you think about it, it's a bit nutty, right? Like, what do you do all day? Well, I just think about my own thoughts. And you're like, well, we've got a wild one here. You know?
yes.
So that's the difference. It's about, and this is why a lot of meditation training in that is very important, because you are cultivating an awareness. And the cultivation of awareness is the most important thing in all spiritual practice. No matter what you practice, if your awareness is not being cultivating during that process, then you're not practicing the right meditation practice, because to abide in your true nature, you need to be able to see your mind from a distance. The nature of yourself, of your ego, I mean, the beliefs you have, the concepts, the past experiences, you need to be able to see them from a distance. And it doesn't mean you don't engage with them, but you utilize the aspects of that which are good, which benefit others and other people. It just means you don't pick up the other ones that are bad for yourself and other people. And you stop playing with those, and you play with more of the good. And as Ramana said, and as a lot of other great teachers have said, Shankara even said this, you essentially have to create good vasanas.
Yes.
Because it's not like you can't experience reality. You will continue to experience reality. You'll continue to accumulate samskaras in your subconscious. But if you're accumulating good vasanas, then you're creating a good samskaric framework for yourself in your subconscious, which then allows you to be a better person in reality. But you still know you're not that as well.
Yes.
That's the difference, right?
Yes.
Because you know you're not that, you're naturally becoming just a better person. Naturally.
Yeah, a better person is in society, and also you could become much more peaceful human being, isn't it?
Yep.
And that itself will affect others in a positive manner.
Yes.
Which is good for everyone.
Yes. And it all begins with what we were speaking about earlier, negating what you are not and abiding more in what you truly are. It might be difficult for people in a complex society, but it's not completely impossible. You've really got to focus on what's important in your life. Is this the highest thing in your life?
Yes.
If it's not, if making money is the highest thing in your life, okay, you're never going to experience it. It's just the way it is. You might be a millionaire, but when you become a millionaire, you still will not have experienced the nature of your true self. And that'll still be itching you in the back of your mind. I've got that $1 million now, but I've never tasted it.
The psychology and psychiatry industry is becoming bigger and bigger than ever as an industry these days, and we know why, obviously.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that those psychology sessions probably won't uproot your problem altogether. Why? Because that kind of industry only gives you a small solution to fix that small problem. And the ultimate goal of a psychiatry and psychology is to become healthily functioning human being within a society.
Yep.
That's the goal of that study.
Yep.
And that's the limit of, that's why it's the limit of the study as well, is to function as a healthy human being within the society. Whereas spiritual practice, especially self-realizing spiritual practices, are to transcending your ego or persona.
Yep.
And go beyond. It's almost like a self-transformation process. So in that way only that we can completely burn the seed of our samskaras and vasanas.
Yep.
Only that way we can uproot our past traumatic experience and emotional pain and whatnot. The psychology and psychiatry may give you some release, but it doesn't last. We all know it. We've all experienced it. Just like reading self-help books, right? It helps for that moment, for that period of time, but it's not everlasting.
No.
Exactly the same. So if anyone who wants to go beyond and above that, really, uproot your traumatic experience and realize something bigger than ourselves, is to go and continue to the path of real wisdom traditions of the East is the only way.
Well, the wisdom traditions of the East, if people begin to follow it, will end the psychology and psychiatry industry.
Yes.
That'll be the end of it.
Yes.
Because we'll stop with engaging with that temporary persona.
Yes.
That we are. We'll be able to see our trauma, our suffering, our conditioning from a distance, from our true nature. And then that is what will heal all of those binding vasanas, which is what all of the great teachers have said. And it's true. It's true. You and I both know this from personal experiences, the past experiences we've had. This has been the only medicine. And no matter what psychologist you go to, as you said, they're keeping you in a society to engage in a society that's fundamentally sick, which keeps them in business.
Yes.
Essentially. Because you're going to keep going back.
To keep people justed in an injustible world.
Yeah. I find it really shocking because we don't spend a lot of time in America, but we have a lot of American friends and people, part of my audience, and I find it shocking the amount of people who say they have a therapist in America. And I really, it's because I don't see that in Korea, I don't see that in Australia, I don't see that here in India. But in America, because of the intensity of the individualism and you need to be this identity and you need to stand out, a lot of people have therapists. And it's a really sad thing because somewhere like America really needs spirituality. But proper traditional spirituality, not half-baked New Age stuff, which actually only tends to your ego and inflates it and boosts it up, need really traditional spirituality, Eastern spirituality, which will begin to dissolve that ego and allow you to see actually the nature of your true self, and you'll be able to see that in others as well. So you won't be caught in a lot of their drama, you won't be caught in your drama. Then the nature of the Tao, the nature of Brahman is to self-organize. And then the society will self-organize, life will self-organize. You want a personal life will self-organize, not even by trying to do so, but because you've abided in your true nature.
Yes.
And that's who we truly are. It's not far, it's not even near, it's what we are.
Exactly.
You are that, and you always will be that, even though you will fool yourself into being something else.
Yeah, you cannot be not it.
Yeah.
You can try as much as you want, but you can never not be it.
Yeah. I remember a disciple asked Papaji once, who truly are you? And he said, I am that. And not from a sense of arrogance, but from a sense of understanding. I am truly that. And so that's what we truly are.
Yes.
Okay, guys, we hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you guys next time.